But First Labor always claims its budgets are tough yet responsible, but in the end, they're always about handouts. And a lot of voters fall for it, even though everything government spends comes out of their pockets in the first place. Today, Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers was reassuring voters that his tough and responsible budget would also involve cost of living relief, which is code for more taxpayer-funded vote buying from Labor.
A key priority, if not the key priority in the budget, will be helping to ease the pressures that we understand people are under. The defining challenge in our economy, certainly in the near term, is inflation. People are under a lot of cost of living pressure. That's why the budget will try and ease what we can of that pressure, primarily through a tax cut for every taxpayer, but with additional cost of living relief as well.
Using taxpayer funds to try and buy votes, well, that's in Labor's DNA. Today's headline spend from the Victorian state budget was a $400 cost of living handout dressed up as a school saving bonus, even though the state's net debt is still soaring, tipped to reach $187.8 billion within 4 years. Now, that's roughly around $27,000 per Victorian man, woman and child, on top of all the federal debt the Victorians owe as well. But don't worry, the debt collector won't knock on your door. What will happen, though, is that schools, hospitals, roads and public transport will all slowly deteriorate because eventually the state's credit rating gets downgraded. It already has been downgraded in Victoria, but it'll go down further. Borrowing costs go up and spending finally goes down because even governments can't borrow forever. Now, what's worse, the interest bill on that debt is massive because governments, like you with your mortgage, have to pay interest on what they borrow. For Victorians, that interest bill's a massive $9.4 billion a year, or it's better explained, $26 million a day, just the interest alone, money that could be much better spent on roads, hospitals and schools. When the Kerner government was booted out back in 1992, Victoria was an economic basket case with a run on its state bank. Back then, net debt was only 16% of gross state product. Well, today it's over 25% of gross state product. In last year's state budget, there was an operating surplus forecast within just 2 years. Such Mickey Mouse numbers. I mean, that so-called surplus has been put off for at least another year. But that's Labor's style, promise tough action for tomorrow while delivering all the goodies today to get the votes you want and hope that tomorrow never comes. What does eventually come, though, is a reckoning in terms of bad roads, collapsing services and lost jobs. With handouts like today's, well, they can mask it, but they can't hide it. Showing its true ideological colours, every government school student in Victoria will get access to this $400 education bonus, but they'll means test it for anyone not in a government school. And still, projects like the suburban rail loop, well, they'll go on because the government can't offend the CFMEU, whose sweetheart deals are part of its eye-watering $200 billion cost. Now, there's only one way out of this fiscal hole, and that's to cut government spending, because in Victoria, like so many other states, there's little left to sell to help clear the debt. Jeff Kennett, well, he could sell the Electricity Commission. He privatised that. Daniel Andrews, well, he even had ports to sell. Now there's almost no saleable assets left to pay down the debt, hence the runaway train for Victorians. Now, later I'll speak to the Victorian Shadow Treasurer and he'll explain how he would deal, if elected, with the state's debt crisis, which is worse than Queensland, New South Wales and Tasmania combined. But at least state governments can cut their spending, if they've got the backbone, mostly by slimming down their bloated bureaucracies. That option's much less available to the federal government, whose big spending measures are baked in. They're things like defence, which can't be cut, or social services like the pension that has to be funded because if you're entitled to the pension, you have to get it. The government doesn't have a choice but to fund it. A bigger problem is the bloated programs like the NDIS in Canberra that can't be cut without enormous political courage. Well, there's none of that with Labor at the moment. It makes you yearn for the days of John Howard and Peter Costello, who took the hard decisions to pay off all of Australia's national debt. Back then, it was only $96 billion, 15% of GDP, but it still took them a decade to do it. There's no chance of that happening soon. Indeed, all the signals from Canberra are yet more federal debt and deficits in the out years on top of all the debt and deficits we've got at a state level. Imagine how much worse it'll be when Labor's green left instincts have stopped all our coal and gas exports and ended the revenue that they bring into the budget. That's when those predictions about a banana republic will feel very real.